Hey, Vinyl Community, Jeff here again, and yes, it is time for another one of our Sunday Christian A to Z rock and metal releases. This is again just a look at the vinyl releases that I have that would be categorized or fall into the marketing scheme known as Christian rock. Christian rock, Christian hard rock, Christian metal, anything like that. Anything a little more heavier than CCM, gospel, pop, things along that line. So we're looking at the edgier side of the music and not digging at this time, in this series at least, into the lighter side of things. So we are at the end of the alphabet. We covered W last time, so we got X, Y, and Z because it's really not, there's no Y's and very few X's and Z's, so it's going to be a short one. I had considered throwing in the compilations, the various artists' releases, but there are a handful. There's actually more of those than there are the XYZs. So I want to keep them split because those I may want to talk a little more about, and I didn't want the video to be too long. So anyway, and we are going to bring in one honorable mention slash CD release because there is one pivotal, what I consider, something that I wish I had on vinyl, but is not so hard to, not so easy to find. So anyway, let's get into this. It's going to be, not too terribly long. So Exalt, we're going to go with this one first. Exalt, Michigan band, came out in '88 with this album Dark War. It was a cassette only release, one of the higher quality, just absolutely pro sounding cassettes that came out back in the day. It was on their own little label type thing, but it was just I remember getting it and thinking, this is just, because in those days we were still getting demo quality stuff from a lot of places, but when it came to independent releases. But this album, when they released it, was far above and beyond your typical lower budget releases. So absolutely loved it. So was totally thrilled when years later, just a couple years ago, they put it out on vinyl. Retroactive put it out on vinyl. They also released it on CD officially, with some bonus tracks. It's on black, came with a sticker. So great band, just your typical, not typical, but they 80s sound, not metal like in the sense of it's kind of a hard rockin' metal, not glam or any of that hair metal type stuff, but just straight up great stuff. And then they put out a second album, which was also later released on vinyl and CD, which is great. Under the Ruins. I think this one was on Pure Metal back in the day, I believe, is when they got signed from. So after they put out the independent cassette, they did get, I think it was Pure Metal. They were on Pure Metal and they released this album. And so that would have been 88. This would have been 90, I believe, if I'm correct. And then they had an album in 91, History, which is one of my favorites. They really kind of, it all kind of came together and had a very, sounded really good. Some of my favorite songs on that album. Dark War is one of my favorites, and then the History. That one I'd love to see on vinyl. It's never been on vinyl. I don't know if they'll do it. It hasn't been reissued as far as I know, even on CD, but I do have the CD. And then a handful of years later, in like late 90s, they did an album which just doesn't sound anything like them. I don't know what the deal is behind that. I have it. Was it Blue Gazebo or something? But it seems like it's a totally different style. So anyway, that it's just, I don't know what that was. But anyway, so there's 3 main albums that fall into the same category, and 2 of them have been reissued on vinyl so far. Would love to see History eventually make it. So then we move into XT. Now XT have quite a few releases prior to this. They put out stuff in the 90s. XT is the guitar player Bjorn Stixon from Leviticus and Sonny Larson from Motherlode, who had worked with Bjorn on his Together with Friends album, and they kind of did over to this thing. Now the first XT album on CD, which came out back in the day, was very, in my opinion, very like keyboard oriented, commercial sounding, and then it's like every album after that was just heavy guitar driven hard rock. Well, then, as things go, they disappear for decades, and then they came back with this one not too terribly long ago. So they are back, and I'm not even going to try to read that, but it's been like in the past 10 years, and this is their latest one, and they did release it on vinyl also, and I don't know why that bag is kind of scrunched up there. So yeah, great stuff. I'd love to see the back catalog released on vinyl one day. That would be some great stuff. Swedish, Swedish. So and this one falls into more of just a straightforward plodding metal type feel. It seems like a lot of the guys in Sweden are in multiple bands, and so I bet you if I stopped and looked, because it seems like I recall some of these guys that played on this album are probably from one of the other many Swedish bands that we get from over there. Because you got bands like Leviticus and Jerusalem, two of the bigger bands over there, and then you've got what's that new band, Larm, which has guys from each of these bands and this band and that band, and you just see a lot of the same characters. All for the King is one of the newer bands over there, and again, you find even on the All for the King album, you got all singing from Jerusalem, singing on that album for a song. But anyway, great stuff. Would love to see some more XT release. All right, and then that's actually there are no Ys. So we're still in the X's though. XL and the DBD, or XL and Death Before Dishonor. This album came out like 93-ish. It's a metal rap album type thing. The singer does spoken word kind of raps, and the instrumentation behind it. I've talked about this before. The instrumentation behind it, you've got people from Deliverance and Crucified and musicians from Vengeance, just all the different bands out there that were backing them up. And then he's like, laying down guitar licks and doing the rapping above it. XL is Todd basically doing all of this stuff there. And this album came out and it blew me away. It was great stuff back in 93. Then they kind of disappeared. I think in the late 90s they released a Live in Nineveh album, which I've never heard. Never heard. It slipped under the radar. Wasn't there another album? Hold on. Wasn't there a second album? Anyway, this one was reissued on vinyl. Great stuff. Glad to see that. Now, he released a couple albums in the 90s. Let's put it that way. I'm totally drawing a blank now. But then disappeared for quite a while. And then in 2016, I remember running across a Kickstarter program for new music from XL. And I supported it, and I got all the digital downloads. It was then later put out on CD, which I did not get. And then in 2019, Rox Records he released, for the Kickstarter, released 2 full CDs, like 20 tracks. And I had them all digitally for supporting it. And then it came out on CD as 2 separate CDs, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And then in 2019, Rox put out a double CD set, Volume 1 and Volume 2 of that. So he did do some new music in 2016. And then in 2020, Rox put out another new album by him. So he has been active recently. So yeah, he's still going at it with a metallic, rappy type flair to it. So he's also done some other side projects with other people that have been in the past couple years, which sound really cool. Would love to see the other earlier stuff come out, but this is like really the pivotal album for back in the day. Just absolutely phenomenal album. And then the last one is Zion. Now, okay, this is where I'm going to insert, because it's the next. I'm going to insert the wish list idea. X Center puts out quite a few albums. This is their first album, Get It. And for some reason, it's on Pachyderm Records. Pachyderm Records is by the John and Dino Elefante. You may know them. John Elefante sang for Kansas. They're 2 producers, phenomenal producers that have done all kinds of great works back in the 80s and 90s, including Kansas and a lot of other bands. But they have their own studio. They have their own record label, Pachyderm Records. They're the ones behind the band Mastodon, not the Mastodon that you're probably familiar with, but the one that I've shown in the past that's spelled slightly different, that was around in the 80s, led by John Elefante on vocals, and other people have been involved. But great stuff. Pachyderm Records, U.S. company, but for some reason when this album came out in the late 80s, it only came out on vinyl in the UK. So to any of my UK friends out there, if you ever find a copy of this in the bin and it's fairly cheap and you can get it from me fairly cheap, I'd love it. It's really hard to find. You go on Discogs, you're going to pay $80 or more for it. Hard to find, but it should be in my collection. It's one of my favorite albums. This particular album, they had a different singer. They had their original singer, very Def Leppard-ish / AC/DC-ish at times. His vocal style changes. And I'm saying the harder side of Def Leppard. His vocal style changes into that category, but love this album, but near impossible to find, it seems like, on vinyl. Now, the singer on that album sang on the one album. I also have a demo by him, which back when they first started, that he, of course, sang on. Then after the first album, they switched singers, and they picked up the singer from Zion. Zion is a band from the early 80s. They released a demo in the 84-ish, Rock for Eternity, not a demo, a custom release cassette tape that came out. And then they put out in like 89, they had an album actually out on Image Records called Fire from the Mountain. And that was about it. That was all they really did. Then the singer had left and joined X Center and had been in X Center for quite a few albums, all of which would be great to see released. And X Center has continued on. They did an album, I don't know, 10 years ago probably was the latest one. I understand there's something in the works. But anyway, so then a few years ago, Thunder from the Mountain 2.0, they basically remixed and tweaked the album and re-released it. So this is their first and only really official album outside of that original cassette, Rock for Eternity, which would be cool to have that archived in some kind of an official CD format. But this album, is basically revamped and re-released and everything. So really, the only thing that's really out by them that you can get is a copy of either the original Fire from the Mountain or this Fire from the Mountain, which is the vinyl. I think there's a CD version of this too. Yeah, South Dakota band back in the day. So anyway, great stuff. Typical commercial hard rock and metal. Very much, the singer is very much compared to AC/DC. Sounds like it a lot. So he fit in really well with X Center, who was always kind of compared to AC/DC vocal styles, raspy type vocals. So check them out if you're into that kind of stuff. I am, and that's some great stuff. And that's really it for the XYZ. Like I said, I got a stack over there, probably double this of compilations that we will discuss in the next video. And that's it for this one, though. Thanks for watching. Rock on and rock hard.